Welcome to the Workplace Accommodations and Assistive Technology. As a job coach, one of your most important responsibilities is helping employees with disabilities access the accommodations they need to perform their job successfully. But accommodation isn't just about being helpful. It's a legal requirement under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and understanding the process correctly protects both the employee and the employer. The Americans with Disabilities Act defines workplace accommodations as any change in the environment or in the way work tasks are performed that enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal opportunities to work. Let's break that down. Any change in the environment, this could be physical modifications like ramps, wider doorways, adjusted lighting, or ergonomic furniture. Or in the way work tasks are performed. This could be changes to how a task is done, when it's done, or what tools are used. That enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal opportunities to work. The goal is equal access, not special treatment, equal opportunity. Important point, not everyone needs accommodations. It's critical to understand that not all employees with disabilities need workplace accommodations. Some people with disabilities can perform all job functions without any modifications or support beyond what you'd provide to any employee during training. Each request for an accommodation is made on an individual basis. You don't assume someone needs accommodations because they have a disability. You identify accommodations based on the specific barriers that person faces in performing essential job functions. Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title I of the ADA is the section that covers employment. Here's what it requires. Employers with 15 or more employees must provide qualified individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from the full range of employment-related opportunities available to others. This includes recruitment and hiring, promotions, training, pay, social activities, all other privileges of employment. Title I prohibits discrimination in all these areas. It also restricts questions that can be asked about an applicant's disability before a job offer is made. An employer cannot ask, "Do you have a disability?" or "What medications do you take?" during the interview process. And critically, it requires that employers make reasonable accommodation to the known physical or mental limitations of otherwise qualified individuals with disabilities unless it results in undue hardship. The employer's obligation. Under Title I of the ADA, an employer is obligated to provide reasonable accommodations to employees or applicants for employment unless such an accommodation would cause undue hardship to the employer. The obligation to accommodate is required whenever a disability of a qualified applicant or employee is known to the employer and the individual or their representative requests an accommodation. An employer is not required to accommodate without a request unless the individual's known disability impairs their ability to know of or effectively communicate a need for accommodation that is obvious to the employer. What this means for you as a job coach, you often serve as the representative who helps an employee request accommodations. But you cannot request accommodations without the employee's knowledge and consent. The employee must be involved in the process, what employers are not required to do. The ADA is clear about what employers don't have to do. Employers are not required to lower performance standards, create new positions, move or fire an employee without a disability to create a position for an employee with a disability, make accommodations that cause undue hardship to the business. What is undue hardship? Undue hardship means significant difficulty or expense. Determination of undue hardship is based on 4 factors. Factor 1. The nature and cost of the accommodation needed. A $50 accommodation is not an undue hardship for most businesses. A $50,000 accommodation might be, depending on the size of the business. Factor 2. The financial resources of the business. What's reasonable for a large corporation with millions in revenue is different from what's reasonable for a small family business with 5 employees. Factor 3. The impact of the accommodation upon the operation of the business. If an accommodation would fundamentally alter how the business operates or create serious safety hazards, it might be undue hardship. Factor 4. The impact on the ability of other employees to perform their duties. If an accommodation would prevent other employees from doing their jobs, that could be undue hardship. Important. The employer, not you, determines if something is undue hardship. Your job is to propose reasonable accommodations and work collaboratively. The employer makes the final decision. Now let's look at the types of accommodations you might encounter as a job coach. Task adaptations. Task adaptations are changes to how a task is performed. The task itself stays the same, but the method changes to accommodate the employee's needs. Examples: highlighting critical information. An employee who has trouble with visual processing had difficulty reading work orders. Accommodation: highlight the critical information, customer name, due date, special instructions, in yellow so it stands out. Color coding systems. An employee struggles with a complex filing system. Accommodation: color code the file categories so they can file by matching colors rather than reading labels. Altering the order of tasks. An employee gets confused when tasks are presented all at once. Accommodation: break the job into a sequence and teach them to complete tasks in a specific order. Using written checklists. An employee has difficulty remembering multi-step procedures. Accommodation: provide a written or picture-based checklist they can reference. These adaptations don't change what the employee produces, they change how the employee accomplishes the task. Job site modifications. Job site modifications are structural or environmental changes to the work environment to accommodate a physical disability. Examples: wider doorways. An employee uses a wheelchair, the doorway to the break room is too narrow. Accommodation: widen the doorway. Ramps. An employee cannot navigate stairs. Accommodation: install a ramp. Adjusted workstation height. An employee in a wheelchair cannot reach a standard height counter. Accommodation: lower the workstation or provide a height adjustable desk. Replacing doorknobs with levers. An employee has limited hand strength and cannot grip round. Doorknobs. Accommodation: replace knobs with lever-style handles that can be pushed down. Improved lighting. An employee with visual impairments needs brighter task lighting. Accommodation: install additional lighting at their workstation. Acoustic modifications. An employee with sensory sensitivities is overwhelmed by echo in a large warehouse. Accommodation: install sound-absorbing panels in their work area. Schedule and policy modifications. Sometimes the accommodation isn't about the physical environment or task methods, it's about when or how work is scheduled. Examples: modified work schedule. An employee needs to attend regular medical appointments. Accommodation: flexible scheduling that allows them to make up hours at different times. Frequent breaks. An employee has a medical condition that requires regular rest periods. Or accommodation: additional short breaks throughout the day. Remote work options. An employee has mobility limitations that make commuting difficult. Accommodation: allow them to work from home several days per week if job duties allow. Service animal in workplace. An employee uses a service animal. Accommodation: allow the service animal in the workplace even if the company has a no pets policy. Communication accommodations. Some accommodations focus on how information is communicated. Examples: written instructions instead of verbal only. An employee has difficulty processing verbal information. Accommodation: provide written instructions or visual diagrams. Sign language interpreter. An employee is deaf. Accommodation: provide a sign language interpreter for meetings and training. Assistive listening devices. An employee is hard of hearing. Accommodation: provide amplification devices for meetings. Materials in alternative formats. An employee is blind. Accommodation: provide materials in braille, large print, or audio format. Segment 3. The 4-step accommodation request process. Now let's walk through the process of requesting reasonable workplace accommodations. There are 4 clear steps. Step 1. Obtain a release of information. Before you discuss anything related to disability or accommodations with an employer, you must obtain a signed release of information from the employee. This is not optional. It's required by HIPAA and ALES policy. The release should explicitly give you permission to discuss information about the employee's job performance, discuss the employee's disability to the extent necessary for accommodation, discuss potential accommodations with the employer. Without this release, you cannot have conversations about accommodations with the employer. Why this matters? Imagine you identify a need for accommodation and approach the employer without the employee's knowledge or consent. You've just violated their privacy and possibly created legal liability for ALEs. Always get the release first. Step 2. Identify the need for accommodation. Job coaches identify reasonable accommodations through 2 methods. Method 1. Observation. You observe the employee performing their job. You notice specific tasks where they struggle despite appropriate training and support. You ask yourself, is there a barrier preventing them from performing this essential function? What modifications might remove that barrier? Method 2. Dialogue with the employee. You talk with the employee about what they're experiencing. This is critical because the employee is the expert on what they need in order to be successful at the workplace. Based on observation and conversation, you should be able to evaluate how the employee functions in the workplace and develop ideas about what support and accommodations would be helpful. 4 principles for identifying accommodations. Principle 1. Develop commonly available and non-stigmatizing accommodations. Whenever possible, use accommodations that don't set the employee apart as different or requiring special help. For example, if the accommodation is a written checklist, make it look like a standard work procedure that any employee might use, not a special needs document. Principle 2. Develop individualized adaptations. What works for one person may not work for another, even if they have the same disability. Tailor accommodations to the individual's specific needs and the specific job requirements. Principle 3. Teach the use of assistive technology. If assistive technology is part of the accommodation, you need to teach the employee how to use it effectively. Principle 4. Assess the ongoing need for and appropriateness of adaptations. Accommodations aren't permanent and unchanging. As employees become more skilled or as job duties change, accommodations may need to be adjusted, added, or removed. Check. Make the accommodation request. According to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, and Title I of the ADA, when an individual decides to request an accommodation, the individual or their representative must let the employer know that they need an adjustment or change at work for a reason related to a medical condition. Key points. Point 1. No magic words required. There is no need to mention the ADA or use the phrase reasonable accommodation. You can simply say, employee name is having difficulty with specific task due to a medical condition. We'd like to discuss some modifications that might help. Each request for a reasonable accommodation must be considered on a case-by-case basis. There's no blanket approach. Requests don't need to be in writing, but documentation is wise. If you make a request in writing, include information identifying the person as a person with a disability, but only to the extent necessary. Clear statement that you're requesting accommodations under the ADA. Specific problematic job tasks. Accommodation ideas. Request for the employer's accommodation ideas. Reference to medical documentation if appropriate. Request that the employer respond in a reasonable amount of time. Step 4. Negotiate and collaborate. The final step is to negotiate and collaborate with the employer regarding the requested accommodation. This is a collaborative process, not a demand. You might propose one accommodation and the employer might offer a different solution. That's okay. The goal is to find an effective accommodation that works for both the employee and the employer. Collaboration guidelines. Guideline 1. Provide multiple options when possible. Instead of saying the employee needs X, say, here are 3 possible accommodations that might work. What do you think? This gives the employer choices and demonstrates you're being reasonable. Guideline 2. Include the employee in the process. Don't make accommodation decisions without the employee's input. They need to be part of the conversation about what will work for them. Guideline 3. Be open to the employer's ideas. The employer knows their workplace. They might suggest accommodations you hadn't considered that work better within their operations. Guideline 4. Get it in writing. The employer may choose to write a memorandum or letter confirming the accommodation. This protects everyone by documenting what was agreed upon. Guideline 5. The employer can request documentation. An employer may request reasonable documentation that the individual has an ADA disability and needs a reasonable accommodation. This is appropriate. Work with the employee to provide necessary documentation from their doctor or other medical professional. Educate employers about benefits. Many employers worry that accommodations will be expensive or complicated. Help them understand. Benefit. 1. Most accommodations are low cost. Research shows that most workplace accommodations cost less than $500 and many cost nothing. Emphasize this. Benefit 2. Accommodations often benefit all employees. Better lighting, ergonomic furniture, clear written procedures. These accommodations help everyone work more effectively. Benefit 3. Accommodations improve retention. When employees have what they need to succeed, they stay in their jobs longer. This reduces turnover costs. Benefit 4. Tax incentives may be available. Some businesses may be eligible for tax credits related to disability employment and accessibility improvements. Mention this if appropriate. ALES Reasonable Accommodation Policy. At ALES, we have a formal reasonable accommodation policy that guides our work. Key points from the policy. Assessment. Upon request, ALS will assess the specific needs of the individual requiring accommodation. Employees or participants should inform their supervisor or program coordinator of their accommodation needs. Confidentiality. All requests and related information will be kept confidential and shared only with those involved in the accommodation process. Accommodation plan. ALES will work with the individual to develop an accommodation plan that is effective and reasonable, aiming to provide the most straightforward and cost-effective solution without compromising quality. Timely action. Accommodations will be implemented promptly to facilitate immediate access to services or employment. Follow-up. ALES will monitor the effectiveness of the accommodation and adjust as necessary. No retaliation. ALES prohibits retaliation against any individual for requesting or using reasonable accommodation. Understanding accommodations isn't just about following the law, it's about removing barriers so people can demonstrate their abilities and contribute fully at work.